Welcome everyone to yet another SDN Community Voices and also the last one of the 24 year season. So I'm very excited to bring yet another amazing guest, another voice from the SDN community to talk a little bit with you guys and have the questions answered. So also if you have any questions at any point in time, just put them on the chat and we're going to go through them by the end of the conversation on the Q&A section. And without going much more about it, I would just bring Andy to the stage and ask him to introduce himself. Hi, Andy.
Hello. Hi.
So,
Are you?
introduction. I think a lot of
Okay.
people know you, but
I don't know. I never assume. So hi, my name's Andy Polaine. These days I'm a design leadership coach mainly. I'm writer and podcaster, but I also co-lead the Masters of Service Design at the Hochschule Luzern in Switzerland. Probably people from this world know me best from the book, which I should have had in my hand, but it's over there. Service Design from Insight to Implementation that I wrote with Ben Reason and Lavrans Lovely. And that will probably do. I've been sort of in the industry for about 30 years.
Yeah. So I think I always start with an open question just to get us starting. So what is design leadership, right? So what is this topic that we're going to be talking a little bit about today? And also was the topic of your keynote on the Service Design Global Conference.
What is design leadership? Well, I think there's a few bits to it, really. I mean, there's sort of leadership in general. And then what does it mean to be a leader who has a design background as opposed to a business background? And so a lot of what I'm doing in my coaching is helping people manage that transition from, essentially someone who used to make things for a living, and a very large part of their identity was bound up in the fact that they make things, they have a craft. And a transition as they move into management and leadership. Some people carry on the tools a little bit, but often you're letting go of those a little bit, and you have to kind of reweave a whole new identity as someone who's a manager and leader in design, without kind of losing. I think a lot of people feel like, well, now I have to become a suit and sort of get rid of all that design stuff and go and do an MBA and all the rest of it, which may be fine. But I think, if you're in that position and you're working with leadership within an organization, jettisoning all of your kind of history and understanding and your worldview as a designer is a real mistake, because you might as well just be another MBA. So working out how do you bring that lens into your work, and also connect with those people where they are, and it's usually not talking about design as much. That's kind of what I'm working on and work with coachees on. So that's what I'd say. Design leadership is this, one foot in each world in a way.
Yeah. And I mean, the talk that you had was, it's not about business, personal, right? So there was a little bit of that conversation that you're saying about understanding that you have this differentiation also, right?
Yeah, the talk was, it had sort of many levels, I guess, in terms, because I like Zoom levels. People who know me or have seen my stuff, I talk about it all the time. No, there was a bit about impact, right? So there's a whole thing around the whole, theme of the conference was impact. And so part of the talk was talking about, we all feel like, and particularly service design people, I think, I want to have some impact at the sort of global level and societal level and all those things. And that's all very good. But that actually the ripple effect of the immediate people around you, the impact you have on the immediate people around you, is probably greater, because those people will then go on and influence other people. And sort of understanding them as people and understanding the whole organization and other stakeholders, even those who you think might be difficult, as human beings, is really part of it. And the reason why I called it, it's not business, it's personal, is because of that phrase everyone knows, right? Of it's not personal, it's just business, which I think is a lie. I think this idea that you sort of put your humanity aside, or your feelings, or your relation, the way you relate to people aside, and then act in another way in business, is incredibly toxic. It creates really toxic work cultures. And I would argue it goes on to have a kind of a detrimental effect on society and the world to be that way. So that's what I kind of focus on, is trying, because part of the design leadership coaching is also helping people understand who they are and how they tick. So that's how that all comes together.
And I think that's a little bit part of design on itself, also the whole human-centered aspect of design and really putting the people first or the user first. And I think it ends up bringing a little bit that when you're talking about the intersection of business and design, also, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think, one of the things I talk there's this story I talked about, and for, this is going to be boring for everyone who saw the talk, but I use it quite often. There's this is an example of me doing tandem skydiving, right? And so the short version of the story is I'm tandem skydiving a few years ago now over Australia, and it's a very, very scary experience, right? If you've done it, doing it for the first time, because you jump out of a plane from very high up. Um, and everything in your body is screaming, this is a bad idea, and in your mind. And what you notice in the images that I used in that is that the instructor that I'm attached to is incredibly calm. He's just having fun. And I
Mm,
realized looking back at it and just thinking about this guy's life, that that's his office and that, this is what he does every day. And so it's not scary to him at all. And that a lot of what we do as designers in sort of business environments is kind of say, design's great, trust us, we should do it this way, do this different thing and this different way of working. It will all be fine. Without doing the sort of commensurate people work of realizing those stakeholders often have a lot of fear and anxiety, right? And because they care about the stuff, and you don't have generally fear and anxiety about stuff you don't care about. And we kind of miss a trick when I mean, a lot of people have said this. We tend to focus our empathy, down onto the end user and customer, but we're not very good at doing that often to our peers or upwards in organizations. And so
mm,
that sort of metaphor of the skydive really
mm.
sort of helped me think about that.
Yeah, and it ends up really important because design is, and I think service design even more, it's quite a collaborative, multidisciplinary practice, right? So you end
Yeah.
up having a lot of people that never heard about, I don't know, prototyping, user stories, brainstorming, all of those kind of big words that we use that everybody kind of already knows what they are. And then you bring those people along the ride and you just say, jump out of a plane with me and we're going to be fine.
Yeah, it's a difference also between a sort of linear way of thinking and a adversity to risk, and a more well, messy really, but a less linear way of thinking and a comfort with ambiguity. So I think that, pretty. I've really experienced this actually at Fjord, because Fjord was part of Accenture, and Accenture's huge, right? Accenture's like, I don't know, 700,000 people or something. And when I was at Fjord, it was already 1,500 people. It's now
Mm,
part of Accenture Song. So, compared to Accenture, tiny, but actually as a design agency, huge. And I was often sort of struck by this misalignment of culture between Accenture and Fjord. And you can often think, oh, it's design and business and all that. But I was trying to kind of work out what it was really. And I think one of the things that happens is around your teenage years. Now, so always one of the first questions I ask my coachees is, what did you want to be as a teenager?
mm,
And some people knew it was, very early on that it was something creative and design. And some people came to it later. But if you say when you're a teenager, 16, 17, well, I think I'd like to get into design or some kind of, arts and a creative profession. There's a lot of people, a lot of adults around you, teachers, parents, family, who do this. They go, yeah, well, yeah. I mean, you could, but it's not a very stable profession, and there's not a very clear career pathway, and it's difficult to make a lot of money. All those kinds of things. Right? And I think if you choose it anyway, partly you feel like it's a calling, and I have to do this thing. Um, and part of it's also that you're comfortable with ambiguity, right? You're comfortable with the fact, well, I don't really know where this career is going to end up exactly. And if you're not, if you much prefer a very, very structured environment and a very linear thinker, and if you're the type of person who, say at school, are very good at doing exams, so tell me what the question is, and I can answer it sort of really well and better.
mm.
But if I have to work out what the question is, well, then I'm all over the place. Those people tend to bias into structured organizations of classic kind of business environments.
Mm.
And so that's the split. Excuse me.
No worries. So it ends up being that famous, I think, design squiggle, right? That the design really has the ambiguity, I don't know how to say this word, but you said it. The really messy front end of the design process that a lot of times we're a lot more comfortable with than maybe other professions.
Yeah.
You okay? No worries. But I think, as
Cold.
you're saying, right, is the impact that we can cause on the smaller level when we're really working on this ambiguity and understanding not only the ambiguity to the stakeholders, but also the people that we're working with. So there's this thing, two sides that you're talking: the external impact and the internal impact.
Yeah. Oh, my voice is gone. Sorry about that. Give me a second. Give me a second.
Yeah. And in the meanwhile, while Andy, he's a bit sick, so think I thank him very much for still being here. But in the meanwhile, if you have any questions about the talk that he did during SDGC 24 or generally about the conversation we're having here, please feel free to use the comment sections of LinkedIn downstairs. And also, if you're interested into seeing a little bit of his talk, we also have the replay tickets from SDGC 24 that are available. He was one of the 3 keynotes that we had in Helsinki, and I believe he was a very amazing talk, and it's very worth it also to go there and see also the very funny pictures of him ton diving as he was talking about that story.
Thanks. Let's see how we do. And my voice is completely gone weird, but we'll see.
Yeah. So I think going back to what we were saying before is just this kind of impact on the external level and the impact on the internal level, right? So how you understand the empathy with the stakeholders, but also what you're doing inside and working the ambiguity on both sides, right?
Yeah, I think so. That was the whole skydiving thing, really. That what the main impact you'll have is immediately on people around you, and so the companies are really ephemeral, and we think the things that you are, that's keeping you awake right now, you won't remember in 6 months' time.
Mm-hmm.
But the kind of interactions you have with people and the moments you have with people are the things you will remember. And so that stuff, I would argue, is more important impact than whatever we're working on. And most of the time, we're not working on things that are that important, really. I mean, sometimes healthcare and welfare and stuff, but a lot of it isn't.
Yeah. And I remember one analogy also that he used that I thought was quite interesting was that analogy of building or metaphor of building a garden. That maybe you're not going to see how it looks like because the trees grow a lot of times longer than your own lifespan, but you're being part of this smaller impact with the other people, and it's more about the process of
Yeah.
building the garden than actually seeing the final result of it.
Yeah, and I think there's it's important to have some humility about that too. Sorry, I can't.
No worries.
That that what you are working on has been around longer than you. Oh God, and will be around after you've gone. Most major services, mobility, telcos, health, finances, they're all things that have been around for hundreds of years. And so we just have a little bit of a moment with them. And we can get really wound up about how important everything is, and particularly with this obsession with sort of velocity and speed. And actually, slowing down and considering it, I think is one of the important things that we can bring, instead of trying to sort of match the velocity and speed obsession of current sort of agile and lean practices.
Mm. So it becomes very important. I think this it ends up a little bit on mindfulness also, and understanding that I was seeing a documentary the other day about radical creativity, where one of the people were saying that a lot of times if you keep pushing something and you don't give the space for creativity to start flourishing, it might not be getting there. Sometimes you have to just slow down
Yeah.
so you can actually see a little bit the bigger picture, and then from there be creative in that case.
I mean, it's well known, right, that under pressure, we become less creative. It's the classic, people dying in a burning theatre because they're all, pushing on a door that opens inwards. Um, it's one of the things that was very early on in interaction design about this, that badly created interfaces sort of stress people, and then they can't kind of find their way through them. And if everyone is really flat out all the time, and again, probably one of the first things I do, there's a kind of type of coachee that comes into coaching, and they're very kind of frenetic and like, oh yeah, no, and really worried, and oh, what's going to happen, and this, and I've got to do that, and it's just we've got too much work, and it has to be done. And I spend quite a lot of time just sort of bringing them down a little bit, because and starting to get them to defend their time and boundaries, because if you don't have it, you don't have time to think, right? You don't have time to think creatively, and you need that downtime. Everyone knows you have your best ideas in the shower or when you're having a walk, and you just can't do it if you're flat out all the time.
Yeah.
And this idea that you should be sort of productive, hyper productive 100% of the time is bonkers. It's really stupid, because you're not. It's just, as I call it, the junk. Busy work is the junk food of work. You kind of think you're snacking all the time and you're doing loads and loads of stuff, but actually you're not really doing anything meaningful because you're not taking the time to focus. Or some downtime. Staring out the window is a really useful activity.
Yeah. And I think it's really what you're saying about slowing down and really realizing sometimes that, as you said, right, the shower ideas or the walk ideas. The other day I was talking with Irun from the Life Center Design School. He was helping us a little bit with one of our projects. And one of the first things he asked was, did you go outside? Because we were talking so much about the different co-creation sessions, all of that. We were working with clients and everything, and they were like, but did you go visit what they're doing or where they're doing and how they're doing? And sometimes just taking that walk and going outside and having that different perspective brings other ideas, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think partly, there's this famous Marshall McLuhan quote, which he didn't actually say. His friend J.M. Calkin actually said it about McLuhan, and then he used it. We shape our tools, and thereafter they shape us. And part of it is this idea that, the industrial revolution, when businesses were conceived of, because prior to that there would have been guilds and things like that. Was the Industrial Revolution, and so management structure, and we think of Taylorism, and Taylor kind of made up his data anyway, or faked a lot of it. Sees a company or an organization as a factory and a thing to be optimized. And this is always my beef with product, actually, is the language of shipping and delivering and all that kind of stuff, in products. And we, in the worst cases, feature factories, right? Where I think that's really, really problematic language, because it creates a kind of mindset around how you see the stuff. And I think that, it's one of the reasons why I switched to that kind of gardening metaphor, because when you think of a garden as a kind of ecosystem, and I think companies are much more like that. They're a collection of people going around doing their jobs, and lots of different things interacting with each other. You think very differently about it, because you start to think, well, if I do this in my garden, the example I give is the growth hack is to plant bamboo, right? And if you've had bamboo in your garden, it's a real pest. It's really difficult to get rid of. And, it wrecks everything else. And so you really have to constantly think, how are things going? And there's like multiple feedback loops, and how are things growing, and what needs to be taken care of, moved and cut back, and all that stuff. And it's never finished, right? It's no one ships a garden. And so there's this kind of very, very different mindset to it. And, I think that that industrial mindset is massively problematic. And I think service design. I know there's a lot of people who are called service designers in their title, and I teach some of them too. But done best, it's an activity that a multidisciplinary group of people do, and in some respects, the role of the service designer goes away because it's everyone's doing it.
Yeah, it becomes a little bit more of a facilitator. Different disciplines that are coming together.
Yeah. Yeah,
and I think it's also what you're saying on the industrial mindset. I think that's a very interesting kind of critique that you brought on the keynote, and also we're coming back to it now. And it goes back to what we're saying about creativity and ambiguity, that if you just are on this Charlie Chaplin industrial mindset, you are just automatic thinking the same thing. So it ends up that you're always doing the same thing over and over and over. And then maybe you think you're doing innovation, or you think you're being creative, but in the end, you're just doing the same thing that you did multiple times before.
Yeah, I mean, I think that goes with that sort of busy work thing, right? This idea that, I was talking about this because you see lots of posts on LinkedIn, right? There's probably one right next to this one saying something like, the pace of the world today is, or, the classic one is, the pace of change will never be as slow as it is today. And it's kind of nonsense statement in a way. I mean, yes, it's true, but also not. This idea that, business is moving faster than ever, or, the world is moving faster than ever. It feels like it, but it's not actually true, right? The world is moving as fast as it always has done. We just hear about it more, right? Our communication channels are flooded with information that we would not have had otherwise, 100 years ago. But I don't really see businesses moving faster. Not massively. I mean, a little bit maybe, but not really. I think they do. I think people inside those businesses think they do. But most of the time they're on a hamster wheel, right? They're running really, really fast, and they're not really, as a business or as an organization, moving much faster. I don't think, certainly not large enterprises. And, the thing I was saying before about the kind of tools shape us. If, tools like communicate, I mean, email has been a plague, but now Slack is a massive plague as well at the same time. It was supposed to sort of replace email, right? Or be the better alternative to email. And, all of that stuff, it slices and dices communications and conversations into these tiny, tiny bits, and sort of flows upwards up the screen. And it's very, it's really easy to lose track of conversations in Slack and where things are. And I think it gives rise to that kind of snacking effect again, where it's like I'm kind of trying to just keep up with my messages all the time, but not actually sitting down and considering, what is it that we're actually trying to discuss here, and doing it with much intentionality. And I would argue that the organization desires then tools like that, and the tools then make that situation worse. So there's a kind of catch-22 that's going on, or a vicious cycle that's going on.
Yeah. And I think it goes back also to what you're saying about the humility of understanding that you are in that hamster wheel. You are maybe trying to run faster, and then pushing other people also to run faster. But the self-reflection of understanding what is the actual impact that you're doing by just trying to make everything ship faster, as you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, I've had two coachees this week, actually, and we were talking about this, and both of them were in situations where the organizations that they worked for, someone had decided, this thing has to be done really quickly. One of them, it was a website redesign for a bank, and they had to do it in a week. Why would you do that as an established bank? It's different if you're a startup and you're running out of money. You've got a certain amount of funding and you run out of money. There is a different thing of like, we need to ship something, get it out there, get a foothold in the market very quickly, and all the rest of it. For established organizations, I don't mean they should go really slow, because enterprises can work really slow, but there's somewhere in between, where for a bank, or the other one was, an established clothing company, the difference between getting it right by taking 2, 3, 4 extra weeks versus shipping it really quickly, is massive, because you know, every time one of those established brands ships a touch point, in this case the website, and it's a bit shoddy, and it's a bit, you know, you can tell it's been done quickly, it erodes trust in that brand.
Yeah.
And it's the same as if you picked up you know, it's like fast fashion. You buy a suit from Zara, and the stitching comes undone, and a button falls off like almost immediately, versus a really well made suit in Savile Row.
Mm.
And there's somewhere in between, right? There's somewhere where you can buy a decently made suit, or you know, a car or a phone or whatever it is, and it's not all falling apart very quickly. But for some reason, we've decided that with digital touch points, that's okay, and it's not.
Yeah. Because it seems, I don't know, it makes so much quicker to ship it than to build it per se. So I think there's a different mindset there that for sure it's a little bit detrimental in the digital landscape.
Yeah,
But
yeah, but it's also this idea that which goes unchallenged, which is speed is de facto a good thing. Like being faster is a good thing, and it never gets challenged. And when I do challenge, and I say, so you know, why is shipping this? You know, and the coach is going, it has to be done. It has to be done next, you know, by next week or whatever. I'm like, why? Well, because you know the chief product officer wants us to go faster. I said, why?
mm,
And it ends up laddering up, and almost always to investors want, you know, putting pressure on. And it's basically rich people want their money multiplied quicker, right? They want to get richer quicker,
yeah,
and but you know, it's often very, very detrimental to brands to do that. And you see, and it creeps into everything. It creeps into physical stuff too, not just digital.
yeah. And with that hook, I'll open up to any questions that people that are watching us have. Please drop them in the comments below so we can address them throughout this last couple of minutes that we have with Andy. And I see we already have one from Nina. She just said, like, yeah, there's so many badly designed interfaces that I wished were to use ones that were greatly designed, and which ones are those?
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking digital stuff, it's quite difficult. There's a guy called Ed Citron. I don't know if people have seen. He's wrote an article saying never forgive them. He has a really good newsletter, and he was talking about this today, which was this week, and he was saying, you know, basically that our digital lives are just one kind of big onslaught of stress and terrible experiences because of all the stuff I've just been talking about, right?
Mm,
And it goes unquestioned. There are very few things that aren't really annoying. There are some things that have been that work really well. So one of the things that sort of comes to mind until they recently broke it with an update is things like Face ID and Touch ID from Apple. And I
mm,
hate to kind of use Apple because they're such a, you know, they also screw up, but they're such a cliche. But they took something that's actually very, very complex, which is the security aspect of you know, getting into your phone and those kinds of things. And they took the complexity on themselves. There's a book, it's ages old now, by Edward de Bono, and it's called Simplicity. And he talks about this idea that there is a fixed amount of or a set amount of complexity in any system, and all you're really doing is pushing it around. So you can either take it upon yourselves as designers and engineers to kind of really work that out so it's really simple for the end user, or you
mm,
can force it onto the user. So all those kind of awful Microsoft sign in 50 million times in order to actually access SharePoint, those kinds of things. And
mm,
those enterprise software does it all the time, was that they kind of push the complexity onto the end user, and that's why you have those awful experiences. Um, there aren't many. I mean, there just really aren't. I mean, I have some really nice physical objects that are beautifully designed. Um, you know, where every time I use them, you know, I've got a pen. It's called a Lamy. It's made by Lamy. It's Lamy 2000. It's just
mm,
really this really elegant, beautiful thing, and you see it quite often with physical stuff because it's been honed over years. The problem with digital is it gets changed all the time. That's one of the things that Ed Citron was talking about.
yeah.
So you tell me, Nina, which things you think are beautifully designed, because we'd all like to know, I think.
Yeah, drawing back the question, and anybody else also, I think that if you know something that is digitally beautiful design, it's always good to know the references that other people might have. Then we also have a question from, not so much a question, more of a, let's say, statement from
Yeah.
Jason. He said that I believe that the digital mindset is that they will come back and iterate, and it is more about the experience never happens because the reflective practice is never mature.
Yeah, I don't know if it's about the reflective practice isn't mature, although I think I probably agree. I think it's more around, where the focus is, right, and what they're bothering to measure. So if you're measuring on how many features you released, then you know that's what's going. That's you're going to get feature creep and just a load of stuff going in there. One of the apps I use actually to go back to Nina's question is IA Writer, because I tend to write in Markdown. And that's been really carefully designed. And what I like about it is they very rarely put new features in. They added a couple recently, but most of the time they're kind of looking at how can we either leave it as it is and add something but leave it as it is, or kind of take stuff out, versus say Microsoft Office, where there's just so much stuff in there, and every time you can see marketing's going, we need another 10 features for this release so that we can tell people. So that's, when that measure is that, then that's why you end up with all that craft. I hear from coaches all the time this thing where they say, the product manager has said, well, don't worry about it. The designer's going, that bit's not really finished or not really polished. And the product manager's like, yeah, but don't worry, we'll come back to that in another cycle. And my coachee always just sort of looks at me and says, but they never do. And I think what it's like is racing around on a speedboat and something falls over the side and into the ocean, and you go, oh no, that thing's fallen over the side, and someone goes, oh yeah, no, we should definitely, we'll go back and get it later on. And by the time they've come to a moment where they think, oh well, let's go back and look at that thing, they look back and they go, oh, it's too far behind now, let's just leave it and let's go on to the next thing. And that's what it kind of feels like, I think, a lot of the time. And then you end up with design and experience debt because of that, right?
Yeah, 100%. I think that's all the questions we had for today's session and also the time. So thank you very much, Andy, for coming, and also hope you have a better, like the cough goes away and everything, because that's always a little bit annoying.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm so sorry about the coughing fit in the middle. I hope people are going to skip past that bit and it doesn't it's going to sit around on the internet forever now, isn't
it? We will edit it out.
Okay, all right, that would be good. Well, thanks so much for having me and everything you're doing in the Service Design Network and the and your Community Voices thing. And have a wonderful Christmas time and New Year.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And to everybody that joined us online, thank you very much, not only for joining us today, but joining for all the 30 plus episodes we did this year. I'm very excited to bring other guests, other voices to next year, 2025, starting back in, I think, January the 16th? January 9th. So just second week of January, we're already starting back strong the year with some new conversations about service design, and generally the community in the service design network. So thank you very much for your time and also for interacting, asking questions, and staying here throughout the year. And I hope you all have a great holidays, Christmas, New Year's, and see you back in a couple of weeks.